This is the kind of story where we need to turn to people with real experience working on economic policy in a real White House, and we need people with full fluency in Republican economic policy before Trump and what it has become during Trump. And we have that full range of expertise covered by our first two guests tonight. We're joined by Jason Furman, who's the former chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors under President Obama. He is currently a professor of the practice of economic policy at Harvard's Kennedy School. And Jennifer Rubin is an opinion writer at the Washington Post, who never had to struggle hard to find at least some areas of agreement with Republican economic policy until Republican economic policy became Trump economic policy. Jennifer Rubin is an MSNBC contributor. And Jason Furman, I want to start with you. You worked on Obamacare and many things under President Obama, often referred to as one of the architects of Obamacare. But I've never heard anyone call it Furman Care. And here we have, which was the equivalent of Peter Navarro's trade war that the Republican senators are suddenly willing to complain about. Talk about what it would be like inside a real White House today, trying to deal with these kinds of policy conflicts that Donald Trump keeps creating.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on this really important topic. You know, look, China does a lot of bad things economically. We need to do something about it. But 2.5 years into this strategy, we've gotten absolutely no concessions from China. So what it's going to take is a more concerted effort rather than, random sprays of policy, announcing it one day, taking it back the next, starting a trade war with Mexico the third day. This fall, we may have tariffs on German autos. Focus on the problem. The problem is China's statist economic policies. Work with our allies and keep at it until we get something done. Don't just shoot ourselves in the foot and the head and every other part of the body.
And Jennifer Rubin, Donald Trump's discovering the struggles that you're going to run into when you start dealing with what economists call industrial policy. Here he is trying to do something for the oil industry, and he ends up smacking the agriculture industry, specifically the corn sector, in a way that he probably could not have understood while he was just eagerly trying to help the oil industry.
Well, listen, Donald Trump loves to call Democrats socialists. This is Stalinist. This is the 5-year plan, and he's busy starving the farmers. So the analogy is pretty good, actually. On this, the Republicans have only themselves to blame. If you remember way back when in the dim past, like a year and a half ago, there was a gentleman who was head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Mr. Bob Corker. And Corker wanted to put on the floor of the Senate a provision to try to take back trade authority from the president. The only reason Trump has the power to do this is because Congress gave it away. He couldn't get a single Republican to go along. So fast forward till now, Corker's, of course, retired, and they say, oh, my gosh, the economy may go up in smoke, and with it, our re-election chances. This is a problem of their own making. And frankly, it goes back to their decision to play along with pulling the plug on TPP, which was an excellent strategy for dealing with the Chinese, would have boxed them out, would have lightened up our democratic allies in Asia. They were quiet. They've been quiet while he's been picking fights with our NATO allies. So now they're in the soup. And gosh, I guess they could vote to take back trade authority, but don't hold your breath.
Yeah, tariffs have always been the province of the Congress, and they're specifically under congressional authority, except for this one little exception. And it is a little exception, and it involves national security. The president has the authority to impose tariffs in the interest of national security. But prior to Donald Trump, no one ever thought that Chinese washing machines were a national security issue. And Jason, let's just for the moment leave aside the illegality of the Trump tariffs that are not based on any kind of national security calculus. But let's talk to the audience about why tariffs are not the tool, not the magic wand that Donald Trump thinks they are. I mean, I think we kind of have a full display of that going on right now. But why did President Obama never say, you know what, I'm gonna help the domestic manufacturer of washing machines by slapping a tariff on Chinese washing machines?
Right. I mean, tariffs are a tax on American consumers. They're a pretty regressive tax that costs the most and takes the most out of the paycheck of low and moderate income households. And then a number of the things we put tariffs on are used in American production. In fact, there's American steel factories that are being hurt because they're using some Chinese steel and remaking it into products here in America. Certainly American automakers don't benefit when you raise the price of the steel they put into American cars and make American automakers pay more for that steel than Japanese or German automakers are paying for their steel. So it's sort of bad for consumers, bad for jobs, and we're not getting anything in exchange for it. China's not making the concessions that we were promised if we went down this path.
Jennifer, we know that virtually all Republican senators were opposed to these kinds of tariffs before Donald Trump started imposing them. But no Republican senator could be more opposed to them than Rob Portman, who specifically worked as USTR, U.S. Trade Representative for President Bush, and worked on these issues every single day. And he has to have seen the destructive nature of what Donald Trump has been doing. But it's taken this long for him to be willing to say publicly, we're going to have to remove these tariffs in order to make progress. Could we expect that with the election calendar in front of us, there could be a much quicker road to dissent over this over the next few months for Republican senators?
I think it depends on where the economy goes. If you do see a downturn, you better believe that a bunch of them are going to be more forthright. But it's not just Rob Portman. Why the heck did Mitt Romney run for the Senate if he's just going to sit there like a lump in the log? He, of all people, understands this. He was a free trader last time I looked. Why hasn't he said something? Why hasn't any of them said something? And to go back to Jason's point, the whole premise is ridiculous. If we had 100% tariffs on all of this stuff, it wouldn't be like the shoe industry would revive in the United States or the industry for making plastic toys. They would just go someplace else, to Vietnam or to other locations, and then Trump would have to put tariffs on them. If the purpose is to create a domestic manufacturing base, the whole idea is flawed. We do manufacturing, but at a very high level in very select ways. And frankly, manufacturing has been slowing down. So the premise, the execution was all wrong. And the notion that we're going to blame Peter Navarro for this, listen, the only thing Donald Trump has been consistent on his whole life is this wrong-headed view of tariffs and trade.
The Quinnipiac poll shows a 54% disapproval of President Trump's positions on trade, a 38% approval. And so, Jason, I think you would have to give the American public a passing grade on that particular economic literacy test.
I'd be happy to give them a passing grade. And, one thing maybe not everyone who took that poll knows is that China has raised tariffs on the United States. They've actually cut tariffs on the rest of the world. And so over the last 12 months, they've cut their imports from the United States, but they've raised their imports from the rest of the world. So that's the flip side of what Jennifer was talking about. Production can move to Vietnam, but also exports, instead of America exporting, you can see other countries doing that exporting to China. So there's a lot of reasons for Americans not to be happy with this strategy.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.